Hello and welcome back to the Business Growth Accelerator. This is Isar, your host. And today, myself and Aaron Price are going to talk about how to be best prepared and make the most out of networking events and networking opportunities. Brilliant.
If you find the right community of advisors and experts, you will be more successful. And let me tell you why. I talked about two specific examples: Deliver You and eFordables. If I were part of a New Jersey Tech Meetup type community or Tech United New Jersey type community at the time, certainly Deliver You was a 9 or 10 figure business. And I did not know what I didn't know. And turns out, as most entrepreneurs understand, there's a lot I didn't know. And I certainly, I take plenty of blame on what we could have figured out. But if I was surrounded by some of the people who I now am surrounded by, I would have very quickly identified some of the flaws in that business and the model. Like primarily, I was a college student. We took 5% of the average of each order as our commission on the order. The average order was $12. We took 60 cents of an order. At the time, we were faxing in orders. Each page to fax in cost us 10 cents because at the time the technology was not nearly as mature as it is today. And so our margins, were very, very small. And that's a huge problem. And we thought, hey, isn't it awesome that we're bringing this to get for people at low fees and thousands of orders a month, but those thousands of orders a month were not yielding the returns that they should have. So, while I've made some great friends and I think it's fun to go to the events, it's really about learning how to save yourself time, learning from the mistakes of others so that you don't make those same mistakes. And that when you have those, 2 a.m. problems, you're like, what the hell should I do? You have someone you can call to talk through what's the best path here. So it's really about surrounding yourself with a community of people who can help you. I think one of the reasons that we've been successful with Propelify and the Meetup and now Tech United is because we create a culture that encourages the kinds of connections that you're talking about here. So I do think this starts with the organizing and the culture that they put forward. And again, that's why finding the right fit matters. I'd like to think of this as like, if you go to, it's like hitting on a woman at a bar, like you kind of got to work up the nerve to do it. But if the organizer at the event, if the person on stage, if the flavor of the event makes it easier for you to say hello to people, like that's a lot better, right? So one of the things we do at our events is, it sounds silly, but we make people, to drive energy in the room, to break up what can be sometimes monotony if you're sitting there for a half hour or longer. I'll have people stand up, high five their neighbor and sit back down. And it's a little gimmicky, but it does a variety of things. It creates an opportunity for you to say hello to your neighbor, and you can blame us for having to do that. So we give you the opportunity to say, to begin the conversation. How many times, I'm sure that you have people listening who've been to an event, who've sat in the chair, who were terrified of saying hello to the person next to them, maybe never did, left, and maybe never said hi to anyone or one or two people and walked out. I think it's absolutely critical to be in a room where a culture of, trying to say hello to people is created, because not everyone has that skill set where they just want to reach out their hand and say, hey, what are you up to? What are you doing? And so I think that's why finding the right environment for you is important for us. We try to make it as easy as possible for you to do those things.
You said if you find the right group. How do I know? How do I know what to look for? And how do I know that I found it? Especially today, there's 1,000 of these groups. Most of them are not as big as successful as, Tech United or Propelify before that, which have thousands of people. But big doesn't necessarily mean good. So what do I need to look for, and how do I know that I found it?
Big definitely does not mean good. It could be 4 people who, locally meet for coffee once a month. It could be among the group of thousands of ours, but it's still going to be there's going to be a dozen, a half a dozen people you connect with that you really lean on. So we just give you a bigger pool to choose from, but we don't expect you to meet with thousands of people. I think you got to find what culturally works for you. I think you need to try a few out and see what matches your style. I'm very proud of what we've built, but it's not for everyone. I think most people get a ton out of it, but there's probably a style that works better for someone else that's different than ours. So I would just say, I think the number one rule for an entrepreneur is get out of the house, literally and figuratively. And now it's a little harder, so it might be virtually and figuratively. But you've got to share your ideas. You've got to share yourself. And I think if you do that in a variety of situations, you'll find a room, so to speak, that works for you. You'll find some people who sort of are, understand you, and culturally the organization is set up in a way that might work best for you.
Brilliant. Again, it ties back to your previous thing. It's all about being able to be vulnerable so you can feel comfortable raising topics where you're not, that are not your strong suit. That's the whole point, which means first and foremost is you need to feel comfortable with the people you surround yourself with. And then second will come, okay, what expertise do they have that can help me? So again, I think it's a phenomenal answer.
Once you're at the event, again, I think you said this in a way that may take it for granted, which is going in with this attitude of like, I may get nothing directly out of this. You're not going to be able to predict primarily what you get out of it. If you think about how events are marketed, it's usually like, hey, come to our event, come to Propelify, Gary Vaynerchuk, Ariana Huffington, Bobby Brown are the speakers. And that's great. But the reality is you can see their content in lots of places, right? So that's like the shiny object that people say, oh, I'm going to this thing and Al Gore speaking. Isn't that great? But really they're there. The primary reason people go to these events is for the networking, is for meeting the people around the room who they may walk out, benefiting from. And so I think if you go into that environment with this give first attitude, which is the part I think you may take for granted, because I think you share this, and we're not talking about give money, give something significant, introduce them to every contact in your network, but just a mentality of like, I'm open to hear what they're up to. If there's somebody in my world who may be beneficial to this person, I'll consider making an introduction or suggesting, something for them. And I think that an attendee at an event will find that that's very beneficial. That playing the role of connector or helper or giving some advice, people value that. And then they will value you in the process. And so at some point, it might be that day, it might be weeks later, that you're going to get the question of what do you do and how can I help you? And I think that's what's most critical. So specifically at the event, if the event doesn't create a culture of saying hello first, say hello first. Do the, hey, what are you up to thing, break the ice in whatever way necessary with the person next to you, because everyone's there to network, and often you need somebody to kind of make that first networking move. After the event, follow up. And I think this is like in sales, it takes 12, 15 follow-ups to make a sale. Well, in networking, it might take follow-up, especially if it's you seeking someone who may be a perceived more sort of senior position. Follow up with people, be respectful of the time, be concise in your messaging and specific. Don't go on 17 pages of how, your business was started in X, Y, and Z. Like some specific offer, maybe suggestion. If you're looking for help, you can tease it, but I'd be careful about that. So I think it's going with the attitude of open-minded, how can I provide some value in this relationship, as small as that value may be, making the first networking move, and then following up. And I've done this myself. I come home from events, with a stack of business cards 3 inches thick, with the intentions of following up with all of them. And sometimes I only get to 2 or 3, and that's okay. But pick the 2 or 3, prioritize those follow-ups. Pick the few that you think are going to be the most valuable and actionable.
I want to add 2 more things. One, to the approaching people, be genuinely interested in other people and what they do. It's, first of all, you'll get a lot more, because if you're really interested in what the other person is doing, what their challenges are, what their industry looks like, what they're able to achieve, you will learn a lot more, and you will know exactly what you said. Is this the right fit? Is that person somebody I can do something with, either by helping him or by asking for help, or both? So that's the one thing. The other thing that is very, very tactical, but I always did back when events actually happen in real life, and now it actually became easier, and it's a little sneaky thing that I do in all those Zoom events. I always have a second screen open. I always have a cheat sheet open, and I take a screenshot of somebody on Zoom when they speak and when they say something that I find interesting, and I write it down, and I look them up on LinkedIn, and then I say, hey, I love what you said about this and that. It connects to so many things that I believe. It connects to what I do, whatever. Make it very, very personal. And again, I used to do the same thing. I would obviously nicely shake hands with somebody and then write on the back of the business card. Now, because we're on Zoom and we're doing this digitally, you can take a lot more notes. You can take screenshots and write down things that people said and get snippets from, LinkedIn of stuff that they've done, so you can relate to making it very, very personal. You will get a lot more out of it. And also, obviously, your chances that the person on the other side will respond are significantly higher.
you also brought up the idea of be interested. I think the reality is not everyone is authentically, genuinely interested. So I might twist that a little to say, like, find an area where you're authentically interested. So even if that's maybe a little selfish, like, I've met a lot of entrepreneurs who are struggling with this. Are you, right? Like, maybe you're looking to gather some information for some hypothesis or some interest of your own, but you can be genuinely interested in this person's response, even if it's a little bit self-serving. But find a way that works for you to have some genuine interest. I know some people are, they're less outgoing, they're less genuinely interested, they just don't care, or they don't care genuinely about all the million things going on in the other person's life, but there's certainly one area that they care about, and you can hone in around that thing so you can still be authentic to the thing that matters to you and probably matters to them. And then the other thing I should add is, at the event, when we talk about networking again with the speakers, I'm shocked at how few people follow up and stand in line to meet the speaker. I mentioned that first startup weekend I went to was probably in 2009 in New York City. The speaker was a guy named David Kidder. The room had standing room only, probably 120 entrepreneurs. And he said, he gave this fantastic talk, and he was like, if anyone wants to talk, I'm going to be sticking around later, and I'm happy to, meet one-on-one with people. And I'm like, great. And I was shocked at how few people actually went up to the guy afterwards and said hello. And so I did. I sent a little follow-up. David became my first speaker at my first New Jersey Tech meetup. He became a seed investor in a previous company, or a follow-on company. Like, those relationships can go far, but you've got to take initiative. I think that's a critical point here. Whether you're meeting the person next to you or meeting the person on stage, like, take some initiative, because that's like 80% of the deal.